Welcome to Beyond Talk Therapy, a podcast exploring the body, creativity, and spirit as pathways to healing beyond words.
I'm Bullano, somatic psychotherapist, social worker, and trauma-informed yoga teacher, here with my co-host Moxie, expressive arts therapist and plant medicine integration guide. If it feels right, take a breath and settle in. This is Beyond Talk Therapy. Okay, here we are. Hey, Moxie.
So excited to be here with you today and hear about your EMDR experience doing it on yourself.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I mean, I did it with a therapist, but yeah, I'm super excited to share my experience and just talk a little bit about what EMDR is and how it can be helpful for people. But I think a big part of today is sharing my experience and actually how spiritual it was. And I don't think I necessarily expected that going into it. However, yeah, it blew me away on the client side. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it today.
Wow. Well, I'm so excited to hear. And first, can we start by just maybe giving the audience a little bit of background about EMDR? Can you tell us what it is, how it works?
Absolutely. So I like to think of EMDR as like a true holistic therapy because it really does hit like all aspects of ourselves. The mind through cognition, through thought. It works with the body through sensation and emotion. It works with memory through like image and visual. And then like with me, I experience like this really spiritual aspect of it. So I always like to describe it as a holistic therapy that really helps your brain reprocess and reintegrate maladaptive memories. So what I mean by maladaptive memories is memories that were unable to be fully processed through our brain, like, or experiences, I should say, because they felt traumatic or stressful. So maybe it was a situation where it was, for instance, like a car accident, right? And that was traumatic for our system. We weren't able to utilize our stress response to like get out of there, right? We couldn't flee, we couldn't fight. So most of the time our body shuts down and kind of stores that experience as a memory that's maladaptive, which is why we get triggered when we're in a car, after we have that experience, because our brain didn't get to have the full experience of, okay, I'm safe now. I've moved through this experience fully. Our brain almost holds on to it as if it's could happen at any moment or it's still happening, which is why we experience triggers so deeply. And it basically gets stored in our long-term memory in a way that's potentially fragmented, like we can't even like see the whole memory. And our nervous system will respond to anything that reminds us of that memory through, the fight or flight response or the freeze response by, having symptoms like anxiety or flashbacks or feeling like dissociative in certain situations. So through EMDR, we're able to go back into the memory network, almost like pull up the memory into our frontal lobe and work to not quite re-experience the memory, because through the process of EMDR, it's like we have one foot in the present and one foot in the past. So we have these parameters of safety, which allow us to reprocess the memory without being flooded, without feeling like we're right back there again. Does that land? Like, tell me if you have questions, because there's like so much more I could share. So I'm just curious.
Wow.
Like,
I mean, I can feel
thoughts.
your passion when you talk about this. And what I'm hearing you say is that EMDR is specifically a trauma therapy. Like it's really good at working with traumatic memories, and it works on this deeper level. It's getting into not only rewiring the brain and the way that we experience the memory, but it's also getting deeper into the layers of the nervous system. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it, yes, great for trauma memories and also great for just experiences that didn't feel so great. For instance, like maybe you're struggling with social anxiety. Anytime you go out to a social function, you like freeze up and you feel really anxious going into it. And then what we do is we set that as kind of our the issue we want to work with. Like you can come in with something like that. It doesn't have to be trauma, but we could link that back to, through the help with a therapist, we kind of find the feeder memories, we call them, that are influencing the social anxiety today. So maybe it was like a work event 10 years ago where your boss humiliated you. Like we wouldn't consider that maybe a trauma memory, but that was potentially a stressful event where you felt humiliated, right? So then our body holds on to that and registers any social interaction as a trigger and causes that social anxiety or that freeze response to come up. So it can be used for really like symptoms that we don't really know where they're coming from. Maybe we figure that out through the process.
Something
Or
like insomnia, maybe?
yeah, potentially.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Other
I've
sim
helped
other you were
folks
talking about
through like
symptoms.
OCD symptoms, which actually ended up being linked back to certain scenarios in childhood. Like you just don't really know. Because they're stored in long-term memory. And a lot of times when we go through difficult situations, our mind kind of shuts down. Our brain, the prefrontal cortex, like goes offline to protect ourselves, which means like we don't have memories stored from those times. So they're not like easily accessible. So through the process of working with a therapist, you can kind of like go back and try to figure out where those feeder memories are, and then we try to work with some of the earlier memories if we can. We don't always have to though. They can be more current, especially if it's like a one-time event like a car accident or something like that.
Wow, that's super interesting because I feel like, as somebody who's familiar with EMDR and is already in the therapy world, I hear a lot about EMDR being used for trauma, but I haven't
Yeah,
heard a whole lot about it being used for other things. So it's really cool to hear you talk about, wow, like this actually spans a much broader range of symptoms or,
yeah,
yeah, troubling experiences that people are having that they want to reduce.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we all struggle with symptoms of past experiences that we can't always pinpoint. But yeah, it's such a phenomenal treatment modality. I mean, it's evidence-based. They've done tons of research. I love that it was created by uh, a woman, Francine Shapiro, which is like amazing that it's a woman who founded this approach. And she basically discovered it because she was walking after a stressful event and realized that her eyes were moving back and forth. And the more that she kind of emphasized that, the deeper she was able to kind of process this experience that she had gone through. And basically, walking is bilateral stimulation. So we use bilateral stimulation, engaging both hemispheres of the brain, going back and forth, either through eye movement. I use buzzers in my practice, or even tones in the ears to help, like I said, both hemispheres of the brain stay on board so that we can, as I mentioned before, keep one foot in the past, one foot in the present. Because when we experience like stress or we're triggered or we have a flashback or a panic attack, whatever, the energy or the activation in the brain is going to the brainstem, the amygdala, the alarm center, for survival. So this keeps more of the brain on board. So we're able to stay present and we're able to like reprocess those memories in a way that make them more adaptive. Which is like just, yeah, it's incredible. It blows me away every time I use it in my practice. Yeah, I used it on myself, like you said. So I'm excited to share my story about that.
Wow, and I, of course, wanna hear about your story as well,
Yeah,
and
we'll
can I
get
ask
there. We'll
one
get there. Yeah,
more
yeah.
question before we
Yeah,
dive in?
yeah, absolutely. There's more I could share too. So I've got like one metaphor I want to share, but yeah, go ahead.
Great. Yeah, I was struck by what you said about, like, that you don't have to that maybe the experience might be a little bit unclear.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
that was my interpretation of it, of, like, maybe you're experiencing something in daily life and you don't quite understand it. You don't quite understand why you're feeling, what you're feeling, or why your response is what it is to certain situations.
yeah.
Yeah, so maybe something, like, a little bit more ambiguous could also be used with EMDR?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the therapist can really help you identify where those symptoms are coming from through a process where we kind of find, like, say, let's go with the social anxiety example again. So like, okay, it's your issue. I want to work on a social anxiety. And then I'm like, okay, when was a recent experience of your social anxiety? And they're like, oh, like last week I went to this party. okay, tell me, or like we encourage our clients to kind of go inside, go inward, and like, tell me the sensations that you're feeling. Notice the thoughts you're having about yourself. Notice the emotions that are coming up. Now allow your mind to float back in time to any earlier experience with a similar sense and let me know what comes up. And then we kind of like do a timeline of like, okay, it was like this experience like 3 years ago when I went to a concert and it like had a panic attack, or this experience 5 years ago when I went to this event, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh, this experience 10 years ago when my boss humiliated me. And maybe, again, that wasn't forefront of the mind, but through this holistic process of like cognition, felt sense, emotions, we can help the brain kind of track back.
Wow. Okay. So that kind of gives a bit of a picture of what an EMDR session might look like. Is it possible to do like one EMDR session? Is multiple sessions required? I understand that there's kind of a phase process. Can you tell our listeners what the whole process entails or
Yeah,
how
that's a
they
great
can do that?
question. There's actually 8 steps in EMDR. We always, always, always start with preparation. Like before we're even diving into the issue we want to work on, we're building capacity in the nervous system to even go there. We're resourcing. We're using nervous system regulation tools. We're building somatic awareness because a lot of times people come in and they don't know what they're feeling in their body. Like you ask them what they're feeling and it kind of goes blank, which is totally normal. So we have to build up capacity and resilience for that through specific practices. I said somatic tools, through like visualization tools where we can help the body really like start to settle and start to, I hate to use the word relax, but like, yeah, we want to bring people into their window of tolerance, which, I'm like, I'm hesitant to explain the whole window of tolerance right now, but it's basically like where our nervous system can function at baseline without being overly heightened in arousal, like, extreme anxiety, extreme
Flooded,
stress, or yeah, flooded, or like under functioning, like dissociation, like checked out.
shutting down.
Yeah, we really want to make sure people are within their window of tolerating emotion and experience without being flooded or overtaken by the experience. We want to build that capacity first. Sometimes that can take like 3 sessions or 2 sessions. Sometimes that can take like months. It really depends on where a person is at and what they're coming in with. And of course, there's like a history taking process. Mine's less formal. I don't do like really super intense assessment in the beginning because sometimes that isn't quite trauma informed. We collect information along the way as we're building that capacity for sharing the information because we do also want to know like how was your experience growing up? Like are there things within their childhood that might come up during EMDR? Because it's very possible it can kind of take us back, even if we're
Yeah.
not, targeting a memory that is far back. The brain kind of knows where to go to heal. It's pretty wild. So we want to make sure we have all the information that we need, that there's nervous system resilience. So we're building all that along the way. And then we do the treatment planning process, which is what I just described, where we're finding our target memories. And then we usually choose like, how I made that list, that timeline of like the social anxiety ones. I'm like, what's the worst memory and what's the first? And we'll usually choose one of those to start with as like our target. And then we'll use that target, bring up our feelings around it, our thoughts around it, the image around it. And then we'll use the buzzers to like, it's almost like a meditation, really. I hate to call it meditation too, because sometimes that can throw people off, but it's a process of going inward and it's an internal experience. We're not talking through it. I'm just checking in every minute or so to be like, what's happening? What's coming up? And you give me a couple words about what's coming up. What we see is eventually through time in the desensitization process where we're using the bilateral stimulation on the target that we start to realize that boss humiliating me, that was more about them than me. I didn't deserve to be treated like that. That boss can go F themselves. Like, like we start to have these like adaptive processes. And it's like, you don't just think these things, you start to feel it on like a cellular level. It's phenomenal. I've seen this happen so many times in my work and every time it blows me away. So your question, like how long does it take? It varies. It depends. Complex trauma cases where there's like a lot of experiences of trauma throughout a lifetime or throughout childhood is going to take a lot longer. than someone coming in for maybe, social anxiety or a one incident event.
Wow. Okay. So you're starting with, there's 8 phases, is what I heard. And you're starting with kind of resourcing essentially and making sure that the person feels resourced. And then once they feel resourced enough, then you kind of go into the targets, into the memories.
Yeah.
And how do you know how do you know when EMDR is over?
Great question. The trainer who I took my training from, Rebecca Case, she's phenomenal, Trauma Therapist Institute. She mentions that it's almost like we're squeezing a lemon until that juice is out.
Mm.
We check in with the body, we do body scans. Go back to the original memory. Is there any like distress or discomfort in your body coming up? Scan your body from head to toe. Is there anything else coming up? Oh, I feel a little tightness in my chest. Okay, let's notice that. Let's go with that. So really, like at the end, we're checking in with the body to see if there's anything left, and we are reprocessing until there is nothing left from that memory. And it doesn't mean that the memory is erased. It just means that we don't have any more adverse reaction to it. So the metaphor that I like to use with my clients, because sometimes people are worried that like going into these memories is scary and hard, and it's like I don't want to go back there. And it's like here's what I like to tell people: we're on an EMDR train, and you're looking out the window, and the memories are kind of like flashing by outside of the train. So like there's some distance there between you and the memory. You aren't in the memory. You're kind of looking at it from a distance. And then, we're not getting off that EMDR train until we're at the end, at the station, at the destination.
And is that measured by anything?
Yeah, we use subjective units of distress scale, 0 to 10. 0 is no disturbance, no distress. 10 is the worst you can imagine. And ideally, we want to get it down to a 0. Sometimes it's a 1 because like there's always going to be something there. But yeah, we get it down to a 0. Yeah. Yeah.
And in your experience, did
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
down to a 0?
No, because I haven't finished my process yet, but I can
Okay.
tell you a little bit about that. And trigger warning, because like mine was from a traumatic event, specifically through complex trauma that I experienced when I was like in my late teens, early 20s. Okay, so before I get into this, I just wanted to share a little disclaimer that not everybody's experiences will be the same with EMDR. Some people have these more visual experiences that, kind of take you on a journey through almost like a mental movie. And some people don't see anything at all. Some people have experiences where they are having thoughts about the scenario and their thoughts start to shift around it. Some experiences can be quite subtle and some can be a little more in depth. So it's best to, if you are trying EMDR for yourself, to just go in with no expectation and know that whatever happens is just right for you and you're gaining benefit no matter what. If you are set up properly, if the preparation has been, really, if the preparation has been done well by the therapist, if all these pieces are in place, it will work for you. And even if it's more subtle, it's still working to rewire your brain. So I just wanted to throw that in before I move into my experience, just so you kind of understand that there's a range of possibility and it's all incredible in itself. Yeah, I really like sought out an EMDR therapist because a couple months ago, I had an experience where I lost service in the mountains and I didn't know where I was and I couldn't find my way and I had a panic attack. And I'm like, there's something here. And there was a moment of almost like a flashback to where I was like, I know where this is coming from. It's from my past abusive relationship that I was in when I was like basically 17 to 21 or something like that. So there was one memory I knew I wanted to target. And I sought someone out. I found this great therapist. And like I said, I kind of knew, my timeline of memories going into it. I was like, okay, this is the one, this is the next one, this is the next one. Because I knew the process. But so we were able to get started pretty quickly. And what happened was my memory, and like trigger warning, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about the memory, just to kind of set the scene of the image that I was seeing, was like me in the woods with this person that I used to date, and I was on the ground. Like, my image was me on the ground, like in fetal position. That was the worst part of the memory for me that I was remembering. I didn't know where I was. Like, I could have very well been lost or like not found my way back. Fortunately, he didn't leave me there. However, it was still very traumatic because I felt very unsafe and very alone. And those were kind of the cognitions, the thoughts around it that I was holding, the beliefs around it that I was holding, that I was unsafe and I was alone. So again, we kind of bring up the image, which was me on the ground. We bring up the body sensation. I was feeling a lot of tingling in my arms. I was feeling cold. And we bring up the feelings around it, which was like, I was scared. I was scared was really like the only one I could really pull there. So when we first went into it, I was sitting, right, with the buzzers in my hand, but I felt like I was on the ground with my arms were shaking. I was freezing cold. I was having the sensations. Yeah, I'm like, I should probably slow down. I feel myself going kind of fast because it is still a little bit triggering. Like I said, I haven't gotten to a 0 yet, but I'm going to go
Yeah,
back
and
and
I
work
was
on
gonna
it.
say, wow, like, the fact that you're even talking about this right now says a lot about
Yeah.
how much this process has already done, even just in what, 1 session?
Yeah. Yeah. This was one
Wow.
2-hour session.
What was,
And I
like, your
have
suds when you started talking about
probably like
this?
a 7 or an 8 or an 8 or a 9.
Yeah, I mean, that's really high, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Super high. Probably the most traumatic thing I've ever gone through because I was scared for my life at that point. But yeah, so I was having trembling, like my body was kind of going through that stress response that I probably didn't get to go through in that moment back then. I mean, this was 20 years ago, like I'm 40 now. This was when I was like 19, maybe even younger. So like, I'm having the body sensations, the trembling, the freezing cold. My body's kind of like moving through that stress response, through the shaking and through the temperature change and all of that. Eventually that subsided. And this is where it gets kind of like spiritual for me. I always remembered, well, let me back up. Like I said, the body sensation subsided and I was like able to take a full breath and kind of calm my body all on its own. And let me go back a little bit and say that we're not forcing the brain to do anything in these moments. It's happening all on its own. The more we try to force and think our way through, it's not going to work. Luckily I know this and it's, I've done a lot of somatic work. So I was really able to just let go into the experience. So after my body kind of went through that stress response cycle and I was like able to calm myself, it was almost like the clouds parted and like sun was shining down into my image because I was like kind of a bird's eye view of the image, right? And I always remembered a tree in this experience. There was always a tree there. What happens next was I had this visual that the tree roots were wrapping around my body in support. And there was like a connection, like a link, a tether between me and that tree.
You felt this in the moment when this was
I
happening, or this is when you were reliving it or, like,
This is
re-experiencing it in the
when I was
EMDR?
using the EMDR process to reprocess the memory. It was almost like a dream. It felt like a dream. Like I was in a dream and I was seeing this happen. I absolutely did not experience this in that moment 20 some years ago. Absolutely
Yeah.
not. My brain was
But
shut
you saw
down.
some tree, like, you saw a
Yes.
tree, and there was
Yes.
something there
The
was some
tree was
imprint
always
of
there.
the tree.
Yep. The tree was
Got it.
always there. And I
Huh.
remember the tree probably because my phone was smashed on that tree. So that tree was a big part of that memory because of, I remember that happening. And, that memory was always in fragments for me, but I always remembered being like on the ground by that tree. So yeah, it was always kind of in the memory, but through the EMDR process, through this dreamlike state that we kind of come to, I felt this deep connection and support of this tree when I felt so alone starting this process. I was like, oh, wow, the tree was there for me. It was supporting me. Incredible. And then my husband comes into the frame and I see him just like pissed and like protective. He had this like protective energy. He didn't do anything to the person that, was my perpetrator at the time. And really like the perpetrator, my abuser, I'll say, like he was somewhere in the periphery while I was doing EMDR, but like he wasn't really like right there, but I could feel his energy somewhere in the periphery. And then like my husband comes in as a protector in my kind of like dream state, EMDR state. And then I experienced the presence of like many beings around me. I don't know who they were. I couldn't see faces. It was just presence. I was like, wow, I was not alone. I was not alone. And I had this like deep sense that I wasn't alone then. even though I felt so alone. So there's a little more.
Well,
Um,
I just want to
yeah,
pause.
yeah, totally. Because I could just keep going. And that's part of my trauma response too, is like, let's just get it out. But yeah, thank you.
I mean, I have chills all over my
Mm.
body.
Yeah, thank you. So what happens next is really powerful too. I missed one part. After the tree gave me support, adult me now went in and
Hmm.
was almost like sea curling my teenage self, like holding and comforting. So that was another big piece and that's kind of like the parts work piece that just happened all on its own,
Yeah.
which was really, really powerful. So eventually, this was like teenage me and maybe merging with me now, got up enough strength to like get up and go toward my perpetrator, which, yeah, I like wanted to yell at him or something to him. But I walked up to him and he shrunk down into this tiny boy and he was in fetal position on the ground.
And you were what, like standing there, sort of
Yeah.
in your power?
Yeah, yeah. But then I got down to his level and I like was rubbing his back. Yeah. Yeah. And empathy and compassion for the little boy who was really hurt inside of him. So yeah, it was powerful, spiritual, inspiring, incredible. And this happened all on its own. I didn't think it into existence. It just appeared in my field of vision and in my body.
So
So
all of this is
yeah,
just
go ahead.
unfolding.
Yeah.
It's unfolding in your psyche or in your
Yeah.
inner world, sort
Yeah,
of.
almost like field of vision. It felt very much like a dream state, but one that you
And
can
the
remember,
therapist
like
isn't
lucid dreaming.
guiding, this is very like a very like sovereign process,
Yes,
of like the
yes,
client really having their own experience, their own
yes,
reparative building of, yeah, reparative memories in some
yeah,
way. And the therapist is just kind of holding the space while you're in the bilateral situation. And
absolutely. Yeah. One thing to note
how
too
did you
is,
feel at the end of that? I mean, that's like,
well, that wasn't really the end. There's more. But let me
okay,
back up by saying that the therapist their nervous system is helping mind stay regulated. Like co-regulation is
yeah,
huge here. That's why we can't do EMDR on our own. We should
yeah,
never try. We
yeah.
need that supportive therapist there to really hold that space. And she's checking in every so often so I can speak what's happening, but we're not analyzing it. We're not engaging in talk therapy, but it does help to like say it because it's being heard. It's being spoken into existence as well. And there's something powerful about somebody witnessing what you're
Mm.
experiencing, part of that co-regulation piece. So yeah.
I love that this little tidbit feels so important as, within the context of this podcast, because this way of working is, like you're saying, it goes beyond talk therapy. Like, we're
Exactly.
not really getting into the story. It's going deep into your own inner world, into your experience, working with the science and the understanding that we have about the nervous system to do the rewiring that it needs to do,
Yeah.
where we're kind of like bypassing the prefrontal cortex, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
going into these deeper layers of our
Yeah.
system.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. And especially because it's happening all on its own with the right set of parameters. EMDR creates the right set of
Yeah.
parameters to allow this to unfold, right?
Yeah.
So, real quick, I'm not going to go into this next part, but basically, what happens next is I was kind of like, after I felt a lot of compassion for him as a young boy, there was a part of me that was like, "Oh, we still need to hold him accountable, or we can't forget the things that he's done." So I was kind of flashing through other memories that we had together. And then like there was a point where I almost felt a little bit stuck, but it was just an image of my childhood home where I lived when I was with him. And then I started to go into childhood memories from there. And every single one of my family members showed up. And I'm not going to get into that piece. That'll be for another day. But yeah, there's more there, right? So I'm going to go back and do another 2-hour session because really like you can't really get into it in a 50-minute traditional therapy session. You need longer sessions. I actually saw someone recently where Shapiro said like 90 minutes is ideal for an EMDR session. But I mean, I've started leaning in more to intensives. Like, let's do 3 hours. Let's do 2 or 3 hours. Let's do 3 hours 3 times a week and really work through this stuff
Oh,
because
wow.
that's accelerated therapy, right? Like we can. There is a phrase in EMDR too. It's like move slow to go fast, like go slow to go
Fast is
fast.
slow, something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've
Something
heard
like
this,
that.
yeah.
Because in the beginning, you have to go slow, building that capacity, building that resilience, those resources. But then once you're in the work, this shit moves fast, you know? So yeah, yeah. So I'm super like, man, doing it with my own therapist and as a client, just like is so empowering and helps me see the even the greater possibility of how this can support. So I'm just like super excited to like continue this work with my clients and with myself, and it's so exciting.
Did you have more to share? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I think I'm good. I feel like it's complete for
Okay.
now.
Oh, wait, no, I just forgot the question.
I'm sure it'll come.
I remember what I wanted to ask you. Yeah, so you started talking about this experience, like, wow, I was so surprised that something so spiritual came through. And I'm curious, like, on multiple different levels of that, anything that you want to expand upon that, and without going into obviously any clients' experiences or yeah, anything that you wanna share about the spiritual aspect of that and how you relate to that, having had that experience, and is that something that you have witnessed come up with your clients?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think it does help to have a basis of connection to spirit or like spiritual practice. And I do. Like I have studied spiritual practice for a while. I have like an altar and like kind of like a devotion practice and where I, call upon angels, ancestors, guides, things like that. And I have felt connected to, my best friend Lindsay who's passed and receive signs from beyond that I truly believe are real. So I think going into it with this basis of spirituality is helpful. At least it was for me because I was already like kind of open.
Mhm.
However, I did a little bit of research after my experience. I just like wanted to research, really Reddit research, right? Reddit can be
Mhm.
research of like spiritual experiences on the EMDR subreddit. And there were a number. And I even saw a story of someone who said, I had religious trauma. I was not spiritual. However, through that process, they were able to connect with something deeper, something more spiritual in themselves. So I think it does have the capacity to kind of open us up to that. And I have seen it with some of my clients, some more than others. However, I feel like therapy is inherently like spiritual, whether we want to call it that or not. But like we are connecting to these really deep parts of ourselves that help us break through consciousness barriers and find meaning in our lives and purpose. And spirituality can be a huge conduit to that.
Wow. It's such a beautiful story of this image of imagining this tree wrapping itself around you,
Yeah.
and
Oh, that tree.
such an affirmation of how nature can be such an incredible resource for people and how, even something as simple as nature, through nature, that is what connects us with
Yeah.
and you're also reminding me of how, I'm not trained in EMDR, but I am trained in brain spotting, which is also
Yeah.
another somatic trauma therapy modality. And there are specific spots that we work with that are spiritual spots. So with like points of focus with the eyes that the
Hmm.
therapist helps the client locate to tap into our spiritual connection or to expand our spiritual connection. And it makes so much sense that these very similar modalities, I mean, brain spotting came out of EMDR and somatic experiencing, and also the ways in which, like, when we're accessing these inner worlds, whether it's parts work or these processes that maybe invite us to go inside in different ways. I'm not sure about the science about this, but I'm curious how similar it is to psychedelics with
Yeah. Yeah.
turning off like the default mode network
No network. Yeah. I
and
agree.
how
It
when
honestly. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just that. No, like if there's a similar mechanism happening there.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Well, it did feel kind of like a psychedelic experience. I'm having these visions and having these feelings that I wouldn't have in my normal default mode, right? So, yeah, absolutely. And I believe there's lots of different ways to get to these alternate states of consciousness, right? So, even like breath work can take us there, right? So, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love it. We'll have to do a whole episode on brain spotting because I'm excited to hear more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to note about you mentioned like this connection with nature. I have always been, I would never go on a hike by myself. I would probably not go into the woods by myself because of my trauma, and that might still be true. I might still not feel comfortable hiking by myself or going into the woods. However, I do feel a deeper connection to trees now, like even just innately like not even seeing a tree, but when I think about that experience, I'm like, that dear tree. Like I just feel, this connection to trees now. Like they are like living that are supporting all these ecosystems underneath us that we can't see and essentially supporting us. So cool. So cool.
So beautiful. Allie, thank you so much for
Yeah.
your courage to step on the air and share this such a personal story with everyone and all of our listeners here. And I'm so excited to continue these threads into wherever else these themes are taking us from here.
Yeah. Totally. And yeah, I've got some space for some EMDR um therapy sessions in my own therapy practice. If anybody's in Colorado and wants to try EMDR for themselves, send me a message,
Yeah, how do
email
people
me.
find you?
And yeah. So I just rebranded actually like today, yoga and therapy
Woohoo.
for the times, which is basically just like therapy practices and yoga practices to meet the current state of the world, which EMDR, like that's part of it. So search yoga plus therapy for the times and you'll find me on Google. Um,
And Instagram as well? Can they find you on
yeah,
Instagram?
absolutely. At yoga for the times
At
on
Yoga for the
Instagram.
Times.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you all
yeah,
so much for listening. We will see you next time.
yeah. We'll see ya. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.